insulating the entertainment industry from piracy and intellectual property theft. Thank you.
Mr. Shittu, we take this question.
To Mr. Senior President. The first question by the senator from Nasarawa South. I'm sorry I didn't get your name properly. It's about losing the election, why I lost election. It is obvious that in year 2011, in the whole of Southwest, or most of Southwest, the Action Congress of Nigeria was the party to beat. So if you were the best of candidates, and if you had all the money, the people at that time in the Southwest had made up their mind that see the Action Congress of Nigeria as a successor party to the Unity Party of Nigeria then, that was the party they wanted. I am happy to say that even though our party then, CPC, was formed less than a year to that election, I still scored 15,000 votes. With due respect to those who were in EMPP. EMPP was a senior party in the country at that time. The AMPP at that time scored 2,000 votes to my own 15,000. And I was the one, my personality was the one which transformed our party to become the third most popular party in the state at that time. I am happy and I'm proud with all due humility that my failure at that time was not about my personality. It was about the fixtures, the vision and the thinking of our people in the Southwest who felt that the Action Congress of Nigeria was the party which represented their interests. And I want to remark that throughout all the 16 states of the southern Nigeria, I scored the highest votes among CPC governors in the whole of South. There was no state in the south of Nigeria which didn't have a CPC governorship candidate, but I led them all. And that is to show that my personality and my popularity played a role, in the amount of scope. You can imagine the difference between a new party scoring 15,000 and a much older party scoring 2,000 in that election. So I hope that I have answered that question. Our distinguished Senator Adebayo talked of religious indictment. I say with all sense of responsibility that I have never been indicted by any panel of inquiry. I recently became aware of a gazette, and I have copies of that gazette. I don't know whether Mr. President will allow me to make reference to it. What happened? In that year 2000, I was the secretary of the National Committee on Hajj. And throughout the period that the crisis occurred, I was away in Saudi Arabia on national assignment. So I was not even in the country when the crisis occurred. And if you look through the gazette, I was not invited. And in law, if you are not invited, if there are allegations against you and you are not invited, whatever finding which comes out goes to no issue. Number two, in that gazette, I was not even alleged of anything. At the tail end of it, perhaps for political reasons, because I was in PDP then, somebody smuggled, something into it to say that the governor should advise me. Advice, not indictment. The list of those indicted is in the gazette. I have copies of it here. He said that I should be advised not to be publishing publications which are capable of bringing about whatever crisis. There is no nexus between any of my books. I have written 7 standard books and other pamphlets on Islam because I believe in morality, because I believe that life must be about service to God. And a lot of people may be religious, but they are not godly. So I describe Nigeria as a country of religiosity without godliness. Because on Fridays and Sundays, you find everybody, being religious. They either go to church or mosque. and yet godliness is not reflected in our behaviors. So I have always had this abiding faith in the fact that Nigerians must be moralized. Nigerians must move more to God instead of the show of mere religiosity. So I was never invited and I was never alleged. There is no allegation and there was also no indictment, because if you talk of an advice cannot be an indictment. I'm speaking here as a lawyer, and I know that even non-lawyers know that there's a difference between indictment and advice. What is more important, sir? After that gazette, where I was sought to be advised, the government brought out another gazette. I have a copy of it also here, saying that they had forgiven all those who had been indicted. And so the case against them was truncated. The case was, stopped by the government, which brought out the thing. So I want to assure distinguished senators that I remain a bridge builder, I remain a social mixer. My secretary in my chambers for the past 7 years is the wife of a pastor. That woman who is my secretary is the one who types and processes all my correspondences, whether private or public. As a matter of fact, she's an SU. She doesn't use earrings, and she enjoys very comfortable working relationship with me. So I am not an extremist, I'm not a religious fanatic, but I believe in God, and I believe that as much as possible, everybody must work towards a saner and more godly society. And there's the question from Senator Kurfi about delay in justice administration. I hope I've gotten him well. I'm happy to say that the government has recently promulgated a criminal administration act, which is aimed at solving all the problems about delayed prosecutions and so on and so forth. And I believe that if, for instance, I happen to be Attorney General, all that I need to do is to pursue the strict execution of the contents of that new act, which happily was passed by this distinguished Senate. The last point is about culture and tourism. It talks of what I would likely want to do. Happily enough, I used to be the Honorable Commissioner for Home Affairs, Information and Culture. And so going to a culture ministry would not be going to a strange land for me. I have done it before. By the grace of God, since culture is part and parcel of our national life and our private life, I will do the utmost to ensure that Nigeria reaps the best out of our culture, particularly in promoting culture as an economic agenda, and promoting tourism also as an economic agenda for the betterment of our country.
My name is Francis Ali Mikena, representing the good people of Edo North. Mr. Nominee, this is the period of change. Can you tell this honorable house what policy you want this government to pursue? 2, if you are given the Ministry of Youth and Sports, how are you going to engage our youth? What policy? That's 2. Third one, what policy are you going to introduce for this our sports? Thank you. Yes.
Senator Joseph Baobina.
The first one is this. Yes, what policy would you recommend to the government to pursue, because this is a period of change? Then 2, if you are given the Ministry of Youth and Sports, there's change. Are you not seeing changes now? The changes all over.
Speaker, address.
If you are given the Ministry of Youth and Sports, what policy are you going to engage our youth? 3rd one, how are you going to reorganize the sports in this country?
Senator Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleague. My name is Senator Obinna Oba, Ebonyi Central Zone. Mr. Nominee, let me first of all congratulate you as a seasoned lawyer. If by special grace of God you are cleared and you become you are posted to Minister of Justice at the Attorney General. For the past 4 months now, this country has no Attorney General. And there are specific functions that are supposed to be performed by the Attorney General. And since we don't have any, and so many things has been done in that ministry, how are you going to handle it or justify them? Number two, you just told us here that you want the government, or maybe you are referring to the Senate, to adopt the manifesto of UPN.
No, the government.
Or the government to adopt the manifesto of UPN. Can you tell us the areas, those areas that is not good in the APC manifesto, that you need a change in that aspect? We would like to know. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Gbenga Shafa.
That's what he said.
Well, he said it.
He said it.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
I will not respond again. Senator Gbenga Shafa, representing Lagos State Senatorial District. Mr. Nominee, I must confess that your reputation for activity in the positive way has gone beyond the shores of Nigeria. And my questions are going to be in 3 parts. I believe one of them has already been mentioned, but I will say it in another way. Given your experience and background as a political activist of note, what do you think should be introduced by this new government in curbing the excesses and restlessness of our youths? You may want to answer that looking at the economic and social responsibilities of government. Number 2, I want you to please let Nigerians know the specific roles that religious leaders must play in governance. 3, and the last. Of recent, we've been seeing the activities, the negative activities of cattle rustlers. It is not limited to any part of the country. It is giving majority of Nigerians who've been affected negatively one way or the other sleepless nights, including those of us who are not even affected, hoping that maybe one day you might be the next victim.
Okay.
What do you think this present government should do to arrest this situation before it becomes a problem that might consume us as a nation? Thank you.
Mr. Shittu, take those questions.
The first is about policy to take care of change. I believe, with all due humility and sense of responsibility, that the Constitution and the manifesto of APC, I want to say with all due humility that I happen to have been a member of the merger committee, not only of CPC, but also of APC, and I contributed implements adequately capture all those policies that will be required to bring about change. The issue of change, with due respect to all distinguished senators, is not just about campaign of fun, but about bringing about real change in the lives of people. We know that over the years Nigerians have gone through a lot of hell. It looks to me, from my experience, that over the years, once politicians are elected into government, they simply say bye-bye to the masses who elected them. A lot of people, when you ask them what have they gained from government over the years, they hardly have anything to point at. So what I believe must be done, and which are captured in both the Constitution and Manifesto of APC, is to ensure that policies which directly affect the lives of individuals are captured. I'll give a very simple example. One of our policies is that children in schools should be given a meal a day throughout the country. If we succeed in implementing this policy, what that simply means is that there must be more productivity on the part of farmers, who must try and produce food items for sale to government contractors, so that there will be adequate food to go around. If there is increased agricultural productivity, ipso facto there will be more money in the pockets of our farmers. Again, you talk of the impact of this free meal a day on transporters. If transporters, necessarily transporters will be required to take foodstuffs from farms to city centers, to communities, where government would have to buy them and then use them in the implementation of its policy. So there are several other such things. Again, the issue of giving some money monthly to the aged, as it was being done in Ekiti State, and I think to a large extent in Osun State also. The party decided to capture this in our manifesto, so that not only would children be attracted to go to school and to stay in school, if only because of the fact that they will have a meal superior to what they used to eat in their homes. With due respect to parents, we know that poverty has become endemic in Nigeria. Most parents hardly have 10 naira to give their children who go to school, and as a result, a lot of children become wayward and they don't go to school. But in the hope that they will get food to eat in school, a lot of children will go to school, and consequently they would benefit from education. The second question from distinguished Senator Francis is about youth and sports ministry. How do you engage our youth? In Nigeria, there are less than 5 active sports which are being engaged in. Whereas in a country like Egypt, there are more than 15 different kind of sports. Sports not only assist in building healthy lives, it is also a money spinner, as we know that competitions at the international level, at the national level, at local level are regularly being held, and awards and monies exchange hands. So I believe that if I have the opportunity of being the Minister of Youth and Sports, I would ensure that we update our actions on the issue of sports. Sports is very important. One of the things I would like to do is to ensure that grassroots sport is developed to the optimum. As a matter of fact, not only would those who engage in the sports earn livelihood, of course a lot of other multiplier effect will also be there. Of course people will pay to watch this. So the economy would become more robust than it is if we really identify all the important sports, including local traditional sports. It will require a whole lecture to itemize all of this, and so I want to leave it at that. Distinguished Senator Barr talked of 4 months, no Attorney General, and functions are not being effective. I am aware, and I have also Senator Bina, sorry, most respectful. I am aware that there are agitations now all over the country for a separation of the office of the Attorney General from that of Minister of Justice. It is unfortunate that Nigeria does not, have these separate offices. I believe and I'm happy that this Senate is already aware of its importance. If we didn't know the importance, the fact that for 4 months we have not had an Attorney General and jobs that are supposed to be done by the Office of the Attorney General cannot lawfully be done would explain the fact that it is very important for us to have a separation in the powers. That the importance of having a separate Office of Attorney General is that once he's appointed, his tenure is like that of a High Court judge. He cannot be removed except with the approval of the Senate. To that extent, he will be able to move even against high government officials, when they are required to be moved against. So it is important that, what has happened for the last 4 months is been lost already. Unfortunately, we have lost the last 4 or 5 months, but I believe that with the appointment of the ministers, it is possible that lost grounds will be regained. Senator Obina again asked about the manifesto. I think I must have covered that in what I've said in the past. I move on to Senator Gbenga Shafa's question, curbing excesses and restfulness of youth. One of the objectives of free education is to produce citizens who will respect law and order, is to produce citizens who will be gainfully employed, is to produce citizens who will have integrity of their own persons. Anybody who is educated will not engage in excesses, will not engage in extremism, will not engage in restlessness. So Nigeria, over the years, we have always believed that free education is expensive. But like it has always been said, if you consider free education being expensive, then try ignorance. You will discover that ignorance is more expensive than free education. So I think one major, solution to the issue of excesses and youth excesses and restlessness is for people to be engaged in education. After education, there must be policies. Because again, I'm sorry I have to keep referring to my, antecedent, that is, the platform, over which I started my politics. Consequent upon free education, there is also full employment. A lot of people still don't believe that it is possible for everybody to be engaged. As far as I am, as young as I am, I think I have adequate ideas about how government can ensure that everybody is educated, both those who are currently unemployed and those who are underemployed. So I want to say that education is the way to go if indeed we are serious about, curbing effectively, youth excesses and restiveness. The next question is about specific role that religious leaders must play in government. With due respect to all of us here, I always see the behavior of politicians and public officers as that of an ostrich who hides its head in the sand, whereas the rest of the body is outside. We are all religious, and yet we don't want religion to have any role in governance. If I have my way, all religious leaders should be paid officers. Government should pay them salaries so that they can play the role of moralizing society. As I am, with all due respect, I don't need a policeman or EFCC or ICPC before I determine that I will not steal. I don't need a policeman before I decide not to do evil, because I know that God, who is the ultimate policeman, who is more effective than our police, would see me. So if we can preach these ideals, and I am happy that these ideals are taught by both Islam and Christianity, we will spend less on maintenance of security. So I believe that religion must be made compulsory in our institutions. And then we should also ensure that even in the Senate, there would not be any, it will not be out of place to have both a chaplain and an imam, so that before the commencement of plenary every day, they would give one item of lesson or the other about governance. I am happy if you have. Whether I should take that. In more organized societies, cattle are not being allowed to move freely as they like. There are cattle ranches, there are thorough paths for them to move. It is not, even in Kenya, cattle don't just move about. There's no doubt that those who have farms cannot take their farms away from their lands. For the cattle rearer, when he's going in a direction, excuse me, he hardly knows or cares whether there's any farm or not. He's sending his cattle because he needs food for the cattle. And because these people are very, very desperate, they are prepared to kill in the process of defending what they consider to be the right of their cattle to feed. So I believe government has a responsibility, particularly now, to ensure that at all levels of government, at the local government level, at the state government level, at the federal government level, we establish cattle ranches which will be necessarily fenced. There are easy ways of doing that, because even in Africa here, we have examples to copy. So I believe that the solution is to ensure, and I'm happy that I'm before the Senate, which has the ultimate responsibility for law to bring about orderliness and security of the Nigerian people. So with all humility, I hope that this will be a challenge for us as a Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
I represent the good people of Delta Central, Delta State, and all Urhobo people anywhere they are in the world. The bad ones, I don't represent the bad ones, I represent only the good ones. Alhaji Shittu, thank you very much for your nomination. I have gone through your CV, very, very rich. You were once Attorney General of Oyo State. You were once a member of the National Committee on Hajj between 2000 and 2003. I ask, in the last election, this last election, you were a gubernatorial aspirant in Oyo State. You lost. Are you in tribunal? Are you in court? And if you are in court, if you win, will you want to go back as a candidate of your party? Plaintiff in his CV said in 2014, in his CV, 2014, and I understand you are in court with the present governor of Oyo State. If you win, will you want to go back as governor of Oyo State? Or you want to remain as a minister if you are cleared? 2, you were Attorney General of Oyo State. If you are cleared and you are made Attorney General of the Federation, what reform will you want to introduce into the justice system? 3, hello? You were a member of the National Committee on Hajj between 2002 and 2003. In view of the recent happening in Saudi Arabia, what reform will you introduce to ensure that such occurrence do not happen again? And finally, what role did you play in the Ife Modakeke riot in the early 80s, positive or negative? Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Danjuma Goje.
It was on your then. representing Gombe Central. Mr. Nominee, I want to take you through the memory lane. On the eve of the gubernatorial primaries, I was in Lagos as the chairman of the screening panel. And you came before us intending to contest against the sitting governor in the primaries of APC. And we asked you a question. Why do you want to contest against sitting governor when the other state, Ogun State, which also has a sitting governor, has no opposition? And your disposition to us as a panel was that you and the governor never see eye to eye. You and the governor never see eye to eye. That you are more popular, more acceptable than the governor, and that in 2011 you are, contrary to what you said earlier on in this interview, the impression you gave was that you should have been the governor in 2011 but you lost. So that's why you want to contest again in 2015 with the full expectation that you will defeat the governor at the primaries. We try to draw your attention to the fact that this man was sitting governor. It's difficult to defeat a sitting governor within his party. I was a sitting governor. I was a governor before. I know what it means. And I drew your attention to that fact. I was a chairman. But you insisted. And you went ahead to contest the primaries and you lost woefully. Now, there's this general notion, and I saw in the papers last week, some states where there will be likely frictions between governors and ministers. Would you tell this hallowed chamber whether, if we confirm you, you will cease, you will put your sword back and work in harmony with the governor? That's question number one. Question number two, and question number two is related to question number one. Are you still going to contest in 2019?
Mr. Shittu, I think you better take this set of questions. They are still fresh.
President, it is true that I contested as a candidate of CPC for the governorship of Oyo State in 2011. In 2014-2015, I was not even given the opportunity to contest, and I'll tell you why. In 2015, well, ironically, it is really supposed to be an internal APC matter. I don't know whether senators want me to. Do I answer it or not? May I be guided by Ms. Yes, thank you. We were in different parties, and then there was a merger. When merger came up, we agreed at the merger committee level that pending the time elections or congresses will hold, we should have harmonization committees. By harmonization is meant that leaders of each of the merging parties would constitute the acting or temporary executive of the party at the one level, local government level, state level. I was the leader of CPC in Oyo State. When the list came out, my name was missing there. Of course, as somebody who believes he has a right, going by the decision of the merger committee, multi-party merger committee, I wrote petitions, 5 in all. They were not responded to. Because I said, look, I must represent my party. because the decision of the merged party, the new APC, is that we should all be there. When no action was taken on it, your distinguished, may I be protected, distinguished. So I challenge my exclusion in court. As a lawyer, we don't resort to fisticuffs, we don't resort to violence, we don't resort to self-help. What we do is, if we have grievances which cannot be settled out of court, we go to court. So I went to court to ensure that my name was, relisted. In the process, our president sent one of our new nominees, Mr. Ocholi, to come and reconcile myself and the governor. And the assurance that we're giving is we would soon have congresses. So, for 2-3 months, just, tolerate what is happening. And I want to say this by way of digression. In several states where that type of thing happened, we even were expecting our president to speak on our behalf, but in his wisdom, he decided to let things lie low. Perhaps because he believed that there was a bigger prize that we could get. In any case, I will do the case on the intervention of Senior Advocate Ocholi. And then the Congress's guidelines came. When the guidelines came, they said people who are interested in position should take forms and fill it, and then there will be contests in all the wards, in all the local governments, and in all at the state level. But then our governor, who is now my friend and my brother, I want to assure, gave out an instruction that he didn't want elections to hold. He wanted us to agree on, consensus. As a loyal party man who is also patriotic, we agreed. But a delegation from CPC then met with him to say that, again as at that time, because ANPP was also excluded from the harmonization committee list, they, in fact, in annoyance, left our party entirely. They left APC. Some went to Labour Party, some went to SDP, some went to ACO. But as a loyal party man, I decided to stay on. So we went to the governor to say, now that ANPP had left, it remains only CPC and ACN. So please, there are other questions. Maybe I should. Mr. President has generously asked me to move on to the next question. The next question is about, as Attorney General, what reform into justice system would you undertake? Justice really is about our lives, because there's no sector of the Nigerian polity which does not rely one way or the other or is not affected one way or the other in the justice administration system. When I was Attorney General in Oyo State, I did two major things. Hitherto, when seminars and workshops are to be held, maybe in Lagos or in Abuja or overseas, they would nominate 2 or 3 lawyers to go and attend. But I felt that would not be productive enough. The same money that you will use to train 2-3 people overseas, you can use that same money to train the entire, law officers in the ministry. So I ensured that all those who engage in training or retraining of lawyers, particularly from different professional angles, were brought to Ibadan to, train and retrain, staff of my ministry. Apart from that, they were also given stipends as if they were going outside, and everybody was happy, and everybody, enjoyed and benefited from those, training and workshop programs. Number 2, I had a request from the civil servants asking that we buy about 5 new buses to take care of the different departments in the ministry. If we buy these buses, it will mean we will have additional expenditure of recruiting drivers and buying petrol, fuel regularly and maintaining those vehicles. So I felt that rather than buying, these 5 vehicles, why don't we do grants, evolve grants for all lawyers, so that not only would lawyers have a vehicle to take them from their offices to courts, they will also be able to come from their homes easily, from their homes to the ministry and from the ministry to courts and so on and so forth, and it makes it easier. So I recommended that each legal officer in the ministry should be given a car grant of 1 million naira, which was graciously approved by His Excellency Senator Rashidi Ladoja. And so we divided them, they were about 36 then, we divided them into 3 different groups and we paid them 1 million naira. Of course, everybody was happy and it improved productivity, greatly. By the grace of God, if I become Attorney General, I would seek to introduce these 2, very important, programs to the Ministry of Justice, so that we will have improvement in the quality of training that our legal officers have, and so on and so forth. Again, I would ensure, as part of the reform program, that every ministry and government department has a sitting lawyer within the ministry. A lot of ministries engage in all sorts of contracts, and because they don't have in-house lawyers, the interest of government is more often compromised. Again, by the grace of God, if I have the opportunity of being Attorney General, I will do this, apart from, the car grants. Again, I would ensure 2 specific areas. Number 1, the area of court congestion. There's no criminal prosecution where the Minister of Justice is not directly involved. So I would do the needful to ensure that adjournment of cases are drastically reduced. Again, there are prison congestion. This is another area that I would endeavor to evolve policies which will bring about, that. So these are some of the things. I was a member of the Hajj committee, and the question was asked, what reform would I bring about in ensuring that the type of, disaster that occurred in Saudi Arabia, does not occur anymore. We all know very well that Nigeria does not have jurisdiction over Saudi Arabia, over any inch of Saudi land. So there's nothing that I can do, even as because the fault really was that of the Saudi government. It was not the fault of the Nigerian officials. The last issue from our distinguished senator is that of Modakeke. Of course, I was in government then when it happened as a member of the House of Assembly. I don't come from Modakeke. Modakeke is not part of my current state. I didn't have any role to play in the Modakeke crisis. Distinguished Senator Goji asked a number of questions. You talked of the eve of the election when we, came for screening. One important issue is particularly that we are in the Senate, and particularly that distinguished senators are to be in the vanguard for the sustenance of democracy. Insofar as the constitution of our party did not preclude any member of the party from contesting any election, whether there's an incumbent or not, I think what I merely did was to exercise my right to contest. I knew, and I remember that questions were asked and I appropriately answered them. So what I have done is in consonance with the ideals of democracy. And we have at the national level, an incumbent was president of Nigeria, and somebody who virtually came from nowhere defeated him. It was impossible for me to defeat if there was proper primary. But there was no primary, and I tell you why. Should I stop it? Senator Goye is asking me to stop. So sorry, that's all right. I will contest in future. Thank you.
Allow the nominee to words in his mouth. Allow him to answer the questions. Yeah. You were talking about your views on judicial reform. I think that was the last. I think you've answered all those questions. Just one more question, then Senator here. I think do you have any questions? You have more questions?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm Emmanuel Bocha, I represent Taraba South. Barrister Shittu, a careful look at your resume reveals that you are an Islamic scholar. Yes. And at that level, you must be familiar with the activities of the United Nations as it affects propagation of religions worldwide. You must also be familiar with Reverend Moon. Reverend Moon, the elder brother of Ban Ki-moon, who is heading the United Nations Religions Organization. You made an interesting remark that if you have your way, you will be able to recruit religious teachers to come together from different religions. Clearly, you are a student of Reverend Moon. The activity of that department in the UN is to bring all religions together in the world. Is that correct? No. Well, I can speak for myself. Okay, now let me learn. Now, Reverend Moon believes that if all religions come together, that they are serving the same God, then there will be peace in the world. What does this portend to the human race generally as a religious scholar? Particularly in reference to your paper, one of your publications. Now, the part B of this question, what will be your perspective in the war against Boko Haram? That is it a religious extremism? And number 3, is there any ideological difference between the APC and the PDP? Take away General Buhari. Are they not all the same people moving from time to time to one party and the next? This is a question. This is a question. And finally, how do you know that you are an astute debater? Is that your personal opinion? Or people have come to you and expressed this to you and also given you an award? Thank you.
Senator Abukari.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Abubakar Kari, representing Borno North. Mr. Ministerial nominee, I can see from your CV you have had several Islamic publications, one of which is Path to Paradise. My colleague, the Deputy Minority Leader, just asked you a similar question regarding Boko Haram, which is today one of the most pressing issues confronting not even Nigeria, but terrorism worldwide. And part of the ideology that is pushing terror, especially religious terror, is to do with the path to paradise. And I can see you have a publication, even though it was published in 1991, way before the rise of Boko Haram. What would you do as a minister of the Federal Republic, in whatever capacity, in whatever ministry that you find yourself? Because being an authority, I would say, based on your CV, to Islamic affairs, would you do to handle the issue of Boko Haram? Because as we see it, military might alone could not defeat it, because we have seen situations worldwide. I have mentioned before in the past, even the mighty Russian army couldn't defeat insurgency in Chechnya. To an extent, there was a time a Russian general was asked, how come the mighty Russian army couldn't defeat the insurgency? And he replied, he said, how do you defeat an enemy that looks down the barrel of your gun and sees paradise? So we're all talking about ideology, we're talking about path to paradise. And also you have another publication that says, that deals with dawah, which also is one of those tenets that Boko Haram is hinging on. But we also find out that a lot of these Boko Haramis do not even know anything about religion. So what would you do as a minister? What advice would you give in the Federal Executive Cabinet or policy to handle the military action and the other actions that you feel that may give the rise to securing peace in the Northeast and in Nigeria as a whole? Thank you.
Senator Matthew Rogidi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I'm Senator Matthew Urogide from Edo. First, let me lend my voice in congratulating the nominee. I have two quick questions for you. Number one, based on the CV that is before us, I think the essence of this hearing is to be able to ascertain your suitability for this position and of course the responsibilities that will go with it. Seeing your CV, about 2004 to 2007, you were a member of the Judicial Service Commission of Oyo State. And then of course, you became the Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice of Oyo in 2007. This period, you were the Chief Law Officer in the state. And I know within this period, one of the very critical happenings in this country, which was the murder of Chief Bola Ige, happened in Oyo, in Ibadan specifically. Today, that murder is still shrouded in secrecy. Nigerians still do not know what happened. I don't know, you might be sent to Minister of Justice again, now at national level. You had that responsibility. I don't know whatever happened, whether it is now, judicial system, what you think was wrong, particularly with criminal justice, administration in this country. But because you were involved in it, that same period, you were in the state. And I also know a very prominent politician,
Distinguished, you can put the question.
Yes, was killed. So what do you think actually militated against, finding out what happened to these distinguished Nigerians that were killed? That's number one. Number two, you have said here with a lot of relish, your followership and membership of the Unity Party of Nigeria, particularly on the personality of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, a distinguished Nigerian too. I have seen too that after that time you were very loud your membership of the party and involvement in that government. Of course, Bola Ige too was the head of that government in the state. I have found too that
you became again very prominent when the CPC came on board. So your followership too is built around the person of General Muhammadu Buhari. I want to ask, after the period, you are still saying in very many years, if after 4 years, what you are thinking that the APC under the leadership of Buhari is going to give to Nigerians, I don't know whether there is free education, I don't know whether there is free health, I don't know what is actually in the manifesto of the APC. If in the next 4 years, what do you expect to see that General Buhari will do for Nigerians, just like the UPN under the leadership of Awolowo did for Nigerians? So, as a member of the Federal Executive Council, what are you going to press that will mean enduring legacy and benefit to Nigerians? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
President, you can take those questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Distinguished senators, the first question from distinguished Senator Emmanuel Bocha is about Reverend Moon and all of that. Reverend Moon is not a Muslim, and his standards and worldview about religion are not Islamic. I am a Muslim. My worldview, my aspirations, my goals are in conformity with what Islam teaches. And what does it teach? It teaches freedom of religion. So I will never subscribe. In fact, in the Quran, if I may be permitted to quote, God said, if he wanted all peoples of the world to belong to one religion, he would have created all of them in that same religion. But he decided in his wisdom that people should practice different religions as they wish. So I don't believe in forcing anybody. And we all know also that Islam means a religion of peace. Peace means no intervention, no force, no violence, no compulsion. There's no compulsion in religion. I will come to Boko Haram. About Boko Haram, I must say that a lot of, in the past, in the last few years, 2-3 years, I've seen a lot of Nigerians unfairly blaming northern leaders for not speaking against Boko Haram. Of course, we know that anybody who spoke against Boko Haram was killed. A lot of examples. Even their legal advisor in Maiduguri was at a stake killed. So is it a difficult thing for anybody who wants to continue to live to make comments in the public fora about these faceless things, the elements? But what I want to assure this distinguished Senate is that even if the Boko Haram elements claim to be Muslims, everything they have been doing are un-Islamic. It is an elementary knowledge in Islam that you do not kill a soul unless it has gone through a judicial process and has been found guilty. If the offense for which it has been found guilty merits, death sentence. We know how they operate. We know that all that they do are antithetical to the teachings of Islam. So I want to say, I hope safely, that I do not consider them as Muslim. The people may claim to be Muslim. People may claim to be Christians. If you claim to be a Christian and you still have a Babalawo that you consult, you cannot in reality be a Christian. If you claim to be a Muslim and you kill people who have not sinned, who have not offended, even if you think you are, your thinking of being a Muslim is a mere perception. So I want to say with all sense of responsibility that I don't want to comment much because I still have a family to take care of, and I also want to leave.
we the nominee are just expressed our political, is it the wish of the Senate that the nominee